This program is brought to you by Bible Way Media, overseen by the elders of the Chipman Road Church of Christ in Lee Summit, Missouri.
There are a lot of Facebook reels and things going around out there about, how life was when I was growing up. A long time ago, back in the days or the times when burgers were always homemade and buns were Wonder Bread. And there was no hope for going out for dinner. And there was no way in the world that I would be allowed as a child to choose my meal if we did. I mean, it wasn't my choice. I lived in that time when you ate what was given to you, and that was that. You ate it, and we were happy to get it, honestly. But there were no choices like many have today. I mean, and perhaps that's how we get the feelings that, these days that, and these future generations, that everything is a choice. That we can refuse what is not pleasant or make us uncomfortable, or, sometimes that life is just not fair, or God is not fair for allowing a cup at our table that we just don't like, something we would prefer to skip over, like at a buffet, instead of accepting it and dealing with it when it just isn't fair. It isn't what I ordered. It isn't what I want. But the problem is, it is what we get. No matter how unpleasant or distasteful it is, well, is our cup, isn't it? So when that happens, what then? It was toward the end of our Savior's life when Jesus was about to go up to Jerusalem, and he took his 12 with him by themselves. And he told them what was coming. No choices, just the facts. No menu. He said, "Behold, we are going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be delivered to the chief priests and scribes, and they will condemn him to death, and will hand him over to the Gentiles to mock and scourge and crucify him, and on their third day, he will be raised up." Matthew chapter 20, verse 17 through 19. That same account is given in Mark chapter 10, verse 32 through 34. But I wonder if they, really understood what was about to happen, the death part. In fact, they thought that they were on their way to take over the country, perhaps. Because right after that, John and James' mother asked our Savior if her sons would be given the place to sit on his right and his left hand in his kingdom. Right after he told them he would be crucified. That's what they asked. I don't know, maybe because they had watched him raise the dead, or, feed thousands with a few fish and bread, heal the sick, make the blind to see, that nothing really would ever happen to him. Maybe they thought that. In other words, he could skip it. And so Jesus said to them when they asked that question, "You do not know what you are asking." And then he asked them, "Are you able to drink the cup that I'm about to drink?" And they, confidently and naively answered, "We are able." They had no idea, really, what that meant. But later I wonder, did this conversation come back to them? I wonder if they started to understand when they went with Jesus to the garden, and he told them his heart was grieved to the point of death. Matthew chapter 26, verse 38. And he asked them to stay awake and pray for him. Before they slept, did they think about what that cup was and reflect on that conversation? What he was going to have to drink? And when they stood with him in the garden, and they watched Judas come forward with, that legion of soldiers, and then come forward and kiss his cheek, the cheek of their master. And then they watched the guards take him away. When they heard Jesus tell Peter in this garden to put the sword away, "The cup which the Father has given me, shall I not drink it?" John chapter 18, verse 11. Did that statement kind of, light up something in their mind and remind them of what he had said? And did they think back on that conversation? Did they wonder if this was what he meant? Or did they convince themselves that Jesus would just let it pass? He would get out of it. Then when all of that was going on, did they remember Jesus told them, "My cup you shall drink"? Did James remember that conversation and think about the cup when Herod Agrippa sentenced him to death? And when he waited for the sword to touch his neck? Did he realize that was what Jesus meant? Acts chapter 2, verse 2, when he said, "You shall drink." Did he realize this moment of his death? Acts chapter 2, verse 2 was his cup. It is the cup of a faithful servant. You know, a faithful servant accepts that life is just not a buffet, that there are conditions that we just cannot ignore, that we cannot decline, and that we cannot dismiss no matter how much we wish we could, we cannot push away from. There are just no choices not to drink, even when it is not pleasant. It is not easy. And even when it is not what we want. You know, Job said it well when his children were dead and his livestock were taken, and he just sat there in the dirt. And his wife told him to curse God and die. Remember? That was his cup. And you remember what Job said, right? He said, "You speak as one of the foolish women speaks. Shall we indeed accept good from God and not accept adversity?" Chapter 2, verse 10. That is what is called drinking the cup. You know, each of us have a cup, don't we? And some of us will reject it, and we'll just push back from the table, and we'll just get up and walk away because you know what? It isn't what we ordered. It's bitter or distasteful, and it may hurt, and it means that we will be lonely. Drinking that cup maybe means that we will be hurt. And so we give the cup back. Like Demas, who just walked away for a menu of something that was easier, more to his liking. 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 10. And you know, it's true, just like Demas, we have that choice. And Jesus had that choice. You know, he could have pushed back from the table and said, "Nope, not for me. I choose a different option." But he realized, you know, that we had no other option. He knew that. And he knew that if he loved us, he had no other option either but the cup. Now, I grew up in that era where kids had no choices. We dealt with what was put on our plate. We never had the option to complain or to reject it. And maybe it caused us to be, you know, more resilient or learn how to deal with the parts of life that are a little more unpleasant. We just dealt with them. They were unavoidable. But I admit that I have come to like options. It didn't take me long to learn how to appreciate a good menu. I like lots of choices. I like options to make sure I am happy and that I'm comfortable and I get what I want. But that really isn't life, is it? Not for the servant of God. If that is who we are, we've already made the choice. There's no other. Because if we know what that means, there is no menu. So what do we do when we're faced with all of that? Adversity, with struggle, with all the hurt and the loneliness in our life that we have to go through if we're going to be a servant of God. What do? We drink the cup because we are not our own. We drink the cup when it is hard, when we don't want to, when it means that we will be lonely and we will have to walk away or walk into a fire. We will still drink it because we have no choice. Really, do we? We don't. We have no choice. If we love, like he did. And it is for this. It is for this that I bow my knees with you today. It is for this that we drink the cup.
We thank you for joining us today. We hope you have enjoyed this program. You can find out more about Bible Way Media by visiting us at BibleWayMedia.org. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can find all of our podcasts on all major podcast platforms. As always, we thank you for listening.